Could I ask guests who are leaving the gallery to please do so as quietly as possible, because this Parliament is still in session. Thank you very much. The next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 8036 in the name of Kezia Dugdale on the Financial Conduct Authority's plans to regulate the payday loan industry. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could please press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. I do notify the Chamber the debate is somewhat oversubscribed, so if I am to be able to call everyone, given that we have a 2 o'clock start this afternoon for legislation, then I would ask members if they could try to keep their speeches to 3 minutes. Kezia Dugdale, can I ask you to open the debate, and you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank yourself and all the members in the Chamber for staying, and draw members' attention to my register of interest, where I'm listed as a member of Capital Credit Union and the Co-op Party. You know, there's a roll call of shocking statistics about the degree to which payday lending is a problem in the UK today. 1 in 3 people in Scotland can't afford to save. 1 in 5 people have no savings at all. The payday loan industry was worth £2.2 billion to the UK economy in 2012 last year, with £8 million lent out in that year, 8 million loans lent out in that year alone. We also know that the most common use of payday loans is for food, closely followed by fuel, gas and electricity bills. The roll call of statistics is endless, really, but I want to tell the Chamber very specifically about one of my constituents called James. James took out £200 to buy some extra Christmas presents in the run-up to Christmas a few years ago. When January came and the paycheck was late, he couldn't keep up with that loan, so he took out a bigger loan to pay the first loan off. When the payments for that second loan got too difficult, he went to another payday loan company and took out another loan. Before he knew it, he was £5,000 in debt to 5 different companies. Now, you might think £5,000 isn't that great deal amount of money. Plenty of people have £5,000 car loans, or maybe carry that amount of credit on a credit card. But the problem was that by the point that James got to £5,000, every single penny of his wage slip was going on payday loan debt. Every single penny. And that's because payday loan companies use something called a continuous payment authority. It's basically a computer chip or a computer program that can check your bank account every 5 minutes to see if there's money in your account. That's what you're signing up to when you take money out from Wonga. Every 5 minutes they can test your account to see if you've got money there. And if you've been paid, they'll take your wages. They'll take it before your rent goes out. They'll take it before the electricity bills, the council tax bills go out. They may even take the money before you even know you've been paid. And that's how people get into tremendous amounts of trouble. James is in a better position now because he went to Citizens Advice and he got the help that he needed. But there are countless people like him. And can I say to the Chamber, Presiding Officer, we need to be really careful about using the language about vulnerability to suggest that the people that go to payday loan companies are somehow vulnerable. That's not strictly true. We know that 75% of people who take out payday loans are in full-time work. We know that 50% of them are men and 50% of them are under the age of 35. 30% of them own their own homes. This is working Scotland. This is people like James. So what can we do about it? Well, first and foremost, we need to cap the cost of credit. We need to limit the amount of interest rates that these companies can charge. And my friend and colleague Stella Creasy has been campaigning for years to do that. And I'm pleased that that campaign is now successful, with the UK government committed to a cap. Because we have to remember that these companies are only in the United Kingdom because they've been legislated out of America state by state. If you look at Germany, the maximum interest rate you can charge in Germany is 40%, yet we let Wonga charge 5,284% and let families get into a tremendous amount of trouble. But the UK government is only acting because they've been forced to do so, forced by the efforts of thousands of anti-payday loan campaigners across the country. But James's story tells us that capping the cost of credit alone is not enough. We need to tackle the rollovers. We need to stop companies upselling products, telling people if you can't pay that loan, we'll give you a bigger one. You can just pay it back over a longer period of time. And we also need to address the prolific extent of advertising of payday loans, which has taken over our radio stations, our TV stations, arriving in your inbox, coming through your letterbox. It's absolutely relentless. The Office of Fair Trading had an interesting report this week. They told us that in 2009, there were just 17,000 payday loan adverts on our televisions. By 2011, that had got to 250,000. Last year, it was 400,000. 400,000 adverts for payday loans just on our TV stations and on the airwaves. So I was keen to highlight those particular issues in the motion. But bluntly, Presiding Officer, these payday loan companies are profiting from the cost of living crisis that the country now faces. There's just simply too much month left at the end of the money for too many families. And the people that know that better than anyone are the Citizens Advice Bureaus across the country, who now see 100 people a week turning to cab bureaus for help. They are in a unique position not just to quantify the problem, but to explain exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And I'm pleased to be able to highlight some of the evidence from their payday loan report card report, which tells us that people who went into payday loan shops, only 35% of them were asked whether or not they could afford the loan before they took it out. Only 20% were asked to provide any sort of evidence about their income. 16% were asked about taking out a bigger loan without being pressurised. And only 7% were offered free and independent debt counselling. Truly shocking statistics that tell us that even when we cap the cost of credit, there's so much more about the way that these companies go about their business that needs to be addressed. I set up the campaign, the Debt Busters campaign around 2 years ago, Presiding Officer, to do 3 things. 1, to take on payday loan companies street by street. 2, to promote credit unions in their place. And 3, to improve debt relief. Myself and Jackie Bailey were taken to the streets this week ourselves, not least in Shield Inch High Street on the set of River City, trying to save Scarlett Mullen, the key character there, who's in a tremendous amount of payday loan debt. But we've been out right across the country. And can I pay tribute to Glasgow City Council, who are doing a tremendous amount to take on payday loan companies. I think they have the most progressive anti-payday loan policy in the whole of the United Kingdom. As a council, they are looking at advertising, pensions, planning, rates relief, the rents that credit unions could get to have an advantage against some of these companies. But we also need to recognise that there's a need for affordable credit. It's no use just telling people payday loan companies are bad. People are desperate. They need access to affordable credit. And I think credit unions have part of the answer. And I know that we'll get the opportunity to debate that in detail next week. Credit unions like Capital Credit Unions offer a direct alternative to payday loans. Instant access money, capped at an interest rate of 26.8%. That's the alternative. That's the model that we need to invest in, and we need more of that. And I know that the government are looking at options. The final part of the campaign is around debt relief, and I know that we're about to debate the bankruptcy bill, and I look to the Minister to think about what else he can do with that bill to protect people from payday lenders. So even when we've capped the cost of credit, there is so much more to do, Presiding Officer. We need to look at the link with football clubs and look at how we deal with financial education in schools. But can I just thank members in the Chamber for coming today, to listening to the arguments, and particularly thank Santa. He's a particularly busy man at this time of year, but he was outside the Parliament this morning warning people against payday loans. And if Santa's got time to do that, I think we can all understand just how important an issue this is. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. I call Jamie Hepburn to be followed by Margaret McDougall.
Presiding Officer, in welcoming this debate, can I congratulate Kezia Dugdale on securing it? Can I also recognise that she has put in a tremendous amount of effort and campaigning on this issue? Can I apologise to Ms Dugdale, yourself, Presiding Officer, and other members? I'm going to have to probably leave before the end of the debate. Can also thank Citizens Advice Scotland for their efforts to highlight this very important issue. It's clearly important that those who might otherwise struggle to secure access any form of credit have the opportunity to do so. But for too long we have seen a pattern of irresponsible lending practice. Credit is often given too readily and at a rate of interest that any person would struggle to keep up with, let alone our poorest citizens. Although I think Kezia Dugdale did well to make the point that there is a broad range of people using payday lenders. President Officer, Citizens Advice Scotland tell us that their recent public survey ran over the past year found that over 50% of borrowers of a payday loan were using it for essentials including food, energy and rent. The point again made by Kezia Dugdale in her opening remarks. The average amount borrowed was between £100 and £400. However, 14% of respondents had borrowed over £1,000, and the majority of respondents were in full-time work, meaning many Scots are struggling with finances for basic needs even when working full-time. That is the reality found by Citizens Advice Scotland. And Step Change, the debt charity, also told us that in the people they work with, there's been a dramatic rise in payday lending with the people they're working with. About 20% of clients had at least one payday loan in June 2013, a tenfold increase since 2010. And indeed, they can break that down to a constituency level in my area, Cumbernauld and Kilsyth. They advised 60 clients in 2012. The average payday loan debt was £843, up from £624 in 2010. So it's clear that we need the industry to tighten its practices. And I think Kezia Dugdale gave a little information from this. Citizens Advice Scotland had asked borrowers to complete their survey and let them know whether their payday lender had stuck to the voluntary code of conduct pledges they'd asked the industry to sign up. And there was some good news. 76% of people reported that the lender had made clear how much it would cost in total to repay the loan. 77% told them how the repayment would work. But some of the other statistics are particularly depressing. Only 35% would check a person's personal finances before giving them a loan. Only 20% asked for documentation to help make sure that person could afford to repay the loan. Only 2% checked personal finances to see if they would be able to pay back an extended loan. So it's clear we need to see more action to sharpen the practices of the industry. I welcome any proposals in that regard. Ms Dugdale set out some. We need to ensure that we can see a better outcome for the people we represent. And can I thank Kezia Dugdale for bringing forward this debate.
Many thanks. Remind members again that speeches of 3 minutes if possible. Margaret McDougall to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm sure many of us in the Chamber will have been involved in campaigning against payday loans in our local areas. So I would also like to thank and congratulate Kezia Dugdale on securing this debate today. I welcome the Financial Conduct Authority's latest plans to regulate the payday loan industry, which would see stricter requirements introduced such as affordability checks on the borrower, a crackdown on advertisements and limiting loan rollovers to 2. However, while these stricter requirements will go some way to addressing the issues with payday loans industry, as the motion says, this is just the beginning and more needs to be done. Payday loans cause financial misery for many. This is a predatory industry that preys on those already struggling financially. This can be seen in the influx of people that are going to citizens' advice bureaus throughout Scotland to get advice on their increasing debt as a result of payday loans. Debts that get worse at this time of year as people struggle to juggle the financial pressures of Christmas with the rest of their bills. However, in Scotland, we don't have to wait for the Westminster Government to take action on this industry. We could and should do more right now. While regulation of the industry is a reserved matter, we could be looking at other options, such as working with councils and credit unions to offer alternatives and establishing a loan guarantee fund in Scotland. Leading the way in North Ayrshire is Labour councillor Joe Cullinane, who recently lodged a motion urging the SNP Council to look into how the Council can best support credit unions and promote financial literacy and affordable lending. It is also hoped that the Council would consider measures to limit the number of payday lenders, bookmakers and pawnbrokers on our high streets. The Scottish Parliament and councils across Scotland have the opportunity to work with credit unions, like the excellent financial inclusion project run by First Alliance in Kilwinning, funded by the Council and the Scottish Government to offer an alternative to payday lenders. We could offer extra support to credit unions through a loan guarantee fund, which would also allow them to lend to riskier clients on the basis that the risk of default was borne by the Scottish Government instead of the credit union. This would allow them to offer same-day credit and reduce the risk faced from defaulters. Perhaps the Minister can tell us today what the Scottish Government's position is on establishing a loan guarantee fund. I am pleased the Scottish Government adopted the wealth warnings that the Debt Busters campaign was pushing for, which highlights the dangers of payday loans this Christmas throughout the 12 days of Debtmas. But of course, payday loan companies constantly bombard people with texts and phone calls to offer them loans. Many people already understand the dangers of payday loans, but they don't know of any alternative for a quick loan. We can and should be offering viable alternatives. So while we have started to address the problem, we need to accelerate the work with councils and credit unions to make sure affordable alternatives exist and establish a loan guarantee fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Gavin Brown.
Presiding Officer, I would like to pay tribute to Kezia Dugdale for her continued pursuit of this matter and for securing today's debate. With the winter afoot, many Scots find themselves turning to payday loans, but unfortunately many are still unaware of the dangers that these seemingly helpful loans pose. Some observers contend that the short-term loans offered by payday lenders are important because they provide a lending option for those who otherwise would not qualify. The problem is that any benefits payday
Mr Gibson, is your microphone pulled? Mr Gibson, we can't hear you too well.
Apologies.
Thank
far
you very much.
outweighed by the risks. Borrowers commonly face interest rate percentages in the thousands, making it difficult for people to pay off their loans and forcing them to roll over their debt for later payment, incurring further interest and fees in the process and causing arrears to impede heavily on their lives. Many become trapped in a vicious circle where they continuously borrow to pay their arrears. Step Change saw an average Scots payday loan debt of £1,529 and found that a staggering 65% of clients with a payday loan had contractual obligations worth more than 100% of their incomes, making the loans impossible to pay off. With this perspective, it is important to recognise the Financial Conduct Authority's new regulatory measures. However, many will not be implemented soon, and we will have seen payday lenders bolster advertising just in time for Christmas, as Kezia Dugdale highlighted. To address this, the Scottish Government created the 12 Days of Debtmas campaign to encourage people to borrow from credit unions which have far lower interest rates and make borrowing much cheaper and repayment much easier. To Citizen Advice Scotland, borrowers overwhelmingly reported that payday lenders are not adhering to the Voluntary Code of Conduct, and some of this was highlighted by my colleague Jamie Hepburn. And thousands of Scots have felt heavy pressure from debt due to payday obligations. The industry's reckless business practices are abhorrent and must be curbed. Currently, jurisdiction over payday loan regulation falls under the Office of Fair Trading, and last May a report detailed the OFT's failings to regulate lenders. The report found that when in violation, punitive measures were rarely, if ever, taken against lenders, and when they were mild. The investigation concluded that the OFT was too passive in its role as regulator. The UK Government has proven it cannot effectively manage the payday industry. More stringent measures need to be undertaken. When regulatory responsibilities are transferred from the OFT to the Financial Conduct Authority in April, the FCA plans to introduce mandatory affordability checks, two-term rollover and continuous payment limits, advertising restrictions and consumer education requirements, all of which are important and welcome. However, more must be done to control this type of lending. The Scottish Government is concerned that these measures are not enough to curb the payday loan industry, and this has been plainly put to the UK Government on several occasions. And in September, Fergus Ewing met with OFT officials to encourage tougher regulatory action. Citizen Advice Scotland recommends an independent study to determine the point at which borrowing becomes too expensive. Similar measures have been successful in the United States, Australia and Canada. Capping interest rates, of course, is one of the most crucial steps in reining in debt. The Scottish Government is also taking action. This year, alterations to the debt arrangement scheme were made. Meant to assist those struggling with high interest obligations, the DAS is now expanded by 40%. Under the scheme, a debt payment programme can be set up which can result in interest and charges being frozen and stop credit harassment. Of course, we are limited in what we can do. Independence would give us the freedom to ensure the accuracy of affordability checks and introduce our own rate caps ourselves. With such control, Scotland will be in a better position to protect consumers, which have been failed by successive Westminster governments.
Thank you very much. Gavin Brown to be followed by Graham Pearson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I begin by congratulating Kezia Dugdale on securing this debate, on the work that she has done on this issue and in the way in which I think she put forward her arguments in her speech today. I think it's beyond doubt that action is required on this issue. The size of the industry, as outlined by a number of members, the growth rate of the industry in particular, and probably most importantly of all, the level of concerns raised by constituents directly with MSPs, MPs and councillors, but indirectly via the Citizens Advice Bureau and other organisations as well. I think it is therefore right in terms of the motion to support the Financial Conduct Authority's proposals as outlined on the 3rd of October this year. Again, many members have outlined what those are, but the clear and fair advertising proposal, including information on where people need to find, or can find, I should say, free debt advice. The proposal on rolling over of loans, maximising that at 2, and the continuous payment authorities, again as outlined by a number of speakers, proposing the limit to the number of times that a lender can take payments from a customer without them having to authorise it, limiting that to a maximum of 2. I think all of those measures are to be welcomed. Now, I think subsequent to the motion being lodged, and obviously subsequent to the Financial Conduct Authority proposals, there was an announcement from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who stated that controls will be introduced on charges, including arrangement and penalty fees, and indeed on interest rates. And the important thing, I think, is that we get that right. Kezia Dugdale made an interesting point, and others have done as well. She stated that credit unions are part of the answer. And I think that is beyond dispute. I think probably everybody in this chamber will agree that credit unions are part of the answer. Where I think the policy discussion needs to take place, both here in Scotland and elsewhere in the rest of the UK, is the extent to which we believe and feel that credit unions can fill the entire gap. The stats were read out that in 2012, the payday loan industry was thought to be worth over £2 billion, incorporating potentially 8 million new loans in that single year. The discussion, the debate, I think, as we go forward, as well as the penalty fees and interest rates, has to be the extent to which we believe credibly that credit unions can fill all of the gap or part of the gap. I'd be very interested in hearing what the Minister has to say into the extent to which he thinks they can do it. But in the short term, in the medium term, I think that will not be easy, even though good progress has been made. Content to leave it there. Thank you.
Many thanks. I call Graham Pearson to be followed by Mike Mackenzie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, can I commend Kezia Dugdale for securing this debate, and also Debtbusters campaigners who have continued to keep this issue in focus for the country, and citizens advice bureaus who are at the forefront in trying to support and advise those who are affected. It's been mentioned that Ofcom reported earlier this month on the rise of the adverts which are utilised to promote payday loans. They indicated that our children are watching 70 payday loan adverts on TV each year, and that their research had revealed that there was a 2,235% rise in the last 4 years on the number of payday adverts which are now demonstrated on our television channels. Each adult saw an average of 152 payday loans on TV during 2012. And the consumer champion Martin Lewis, the founder of Money Saving Expert, he indicated that the statistics proved that payday lenders were grooming the next generation of customers so that they would see as normal an extremely abnormal form of lending. But what of this industry? It's been indicated that they will charge up to 5,000% on APR interest, and that in those circumstances we are talking about an industry which creates a millstone for many families who find it difficult and sometimes impossible to escape. In 2013, the OFT focused on 50 leading lenders and gave them 60 days to replicate shortcomings, and those shortcomings indicated a failure to properly assess the risk and the ability of a customer to pay, an aggressive debt recovery plan, and a lack of provision of proper explanation in terms of the responsibilities that customers face in repayments. The FCA was a form of oversight in terms or is being provided, the Financial Conduct Authority is being provided as a form of oversight as of April next year, and hopefully that will see a more aggressive reflection of how this industry should be viewed. The whole environment reflects a Gordon Gekko approach to financial provision. Greed is good, and for some in our communities, a payday loan might be a short-term consumer need solution, but for many it's a burden, it's a yoke, it's a slippery slope leading to fear, stress and family disharmony. What can we ask the Scottish Government to do? They could mount an education campaign promoting the downside to involvement in this industry, encourage the FCA in terms of licensing criteria, and promote support for credit unions and ethical banks to provide appropriate credit for people who need it. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. I now call Mike Mackenzie to be followed by Alison Johnston.
Presiding Officer, in considering the issue of payday loans, I think it's useful, firstly, to consider how it is that we got into this unacceptable position. I'm old enough to remember when employees got a weekly pay packet with real cash inside, and in those prudent days, bills were paid weekly and the surplus was carefully nurtured. Most importantly, incomes at the lower end of the spectrum were much higher in real terms than today. Wealth and income inequality has increased markedly over the last 30 years, and the movement towards paying employees monthly in arrears helped fuel the credit industry, and deregulation aided and abetted this. And Thatcher's economic plan depended on a credit boom that created a false sense of well-being. Buy now and pay tomorrow was heavily promoted as consumerism really kicked off, and banks expanded dramatically as they were progressively deregulated until the inevitable credit crunch struck. The same economic plan that shut down our industries and terminally impoverished communities relied on addicting us to credit and creating a huge expansion of financial services to help fill the black hole in our economy. All of our economic eggs were put into one basket. And sadly, in such an unequal society, the recent recessionary pain is visited most on those least able to bear it. The Scottish Government, on a reducing budget, simply cannot mitigate all the pain in Scotland, just as it can't regulate the banks or legislate to curb the wicked excesses of payday loans. All we can do is lobby the UK Government and advise consumers. And I do know that the Minister has been actively engaging with the UK Government in an attempt to persuade them to regulate this industry. But against this background of 30 years of increasing inequality, we simply don't have sufficient levers in this Parliament to create a fairer and a more equal society in a meaningful timescale. And that's the real cure for these ailments, because there will always be those that seek to prey on the poor and the vulnerable. And I'm glad, therefore, that the UK Government has at last indicated a commitment to regulate payday loans, although I fear that they will not go far enough. As matters stand, it appears that it will be too little, too late, as we've come to expect from Westminster. And I can only contrast this with the Scottish Government's rapid action earlier this year to replace, for example, stamp duty with land and buildings transaction tax, quickly moving to deal with the long-standing concerns which Westminster had failed to deal with for many years. In a world which moves at an ever faster pace, it's necessary for governments to move quickly to deal with obvious problems like payday loans. That's why I'm also glad that the Scottish Government has set up and moved quickly to improve the debt arrangement scheme that Mr Gibson described, and recently took steps to allow the earlier freezing of interest on payday loans and other debts, and providing a means for financially distressed people to get back on their feet whilst avoiding bankruptcy. Presiding Officer, the evidence for robust regulation of payday loans is overwhelming. I hope all members of this Parliament can unite and send a very clear message to Westminster that this is the case. But beyond that, we need a game changer to properly tackle inequality. I would suggest that the opportunity for such a game changer will come on September the 18th next year.
Thank you very much. Alison Johnson, I'd be grateful if you could stick to 3 minutes to be followed by Duncan McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Kezia Dugdale for securing this debate on this important subject and for her ongoing work on this issue. I too welcome the opportunity to raise awareness of the impact of payday lending on some of the individuals and families who have felt they had simply no option but to apply for a short-term loan when that next payday was simply too far away, when there wasn't enough food in the cupboard or money for the electricity meter or bus fares to get to work or college. And it's not surprising that people turn to this form of credit. The ubiquity of advertising for payday loans in our newspapers, on our televisions, on radios is remarkable. Last year, it accounted for 1.2% of all advertising on TV in the UK. Kezia Dugdale highlighted that payday lenders bought some 17,000 ad spots in 2008. This had risen to 397,000 last year. More than 1 in 100 ads was an ad for a payday loan. This non-stop barrage normalises payday lending in our culture. And as Graham Pearson noted, children aged 4 to 15 saw millions of ads from payday lenders, according to research from Ofcom. And we've heard that very young children are pestering their parents to apply for a payday loan. And we know too that people turn to these loans as a last resort. 6 million Britons have been declined credit by their banks in the past 3 years. An affordable alternative credit is part of the solution. But there's been a significant increase in the number of clients with arrears in priority areas: gas, electricity, rent. Credit is being sought not for luxuries, but for everyday living costs. In the face of inflation-busting price hikes by the big 6 energy companies, it's not surprising that energy arrears now affect over 1 in 10. And organisations like Citizens Advice and Step Change are working incredibly hard, hearing from and seeing a notable increase in the number of people seeking their expert help in the face of rising personal and household debt. When it's £10 you don't have, £10 of debt is a problem. But there's a growing number of high-income clients approaching these invaluable charities too. And while average unsecured debt has been falling in the UK for the last 5 years, over 10% of Step Change client debt in Scotland last year was due to payday loans, the largest share among the home nations. There are many clients with payday loans whose contractual payments are worth more than 100% of their income. Citizens Advice Scotland has reported cases where payday loans were received by clients who were unable to repay that loan. Vetting was simply inadequate. And I was horrified to learn the case of a client in a Citizens Advice Bureau in the east of Scotland whose payday lender contacted his workplace and spoke to his colleagues about his outstanding debt. And that even though he'd set up an affordable repayment schedule, the agent was demanding full payment. Presiding Officer, when I first saw an advert for payday lending on television, I thought there'd been a typo. I simply couldn't accept that it could be possible or legal to advertise interest rates of almost £3,000 and higher. Those of us on the Energy, Economy and Tourism Committee know that people don't purposely lead themselves into debt. They enter a credit agreement with the best of intentions, but sometimes employment and family circumstances change with little notice. With my colleagues in this chamber, I'm absolutely committed to do all that I can to mitigate the impacts of this form of lending. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Duncan McNeill.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm conscious of time very quickly. Obviously, we would first of all like to thank Kezia Dugdale not only for giving us this opportunity to have this debate, but for all her good work and, with Debt Busters and bringing forward that campaign and the general debate that has brought some success in terms, although which has been referred to, which is limited, because of course we have set out maybe a sketch or a plan that can prevent more people becoming involved with these payday lending companies, but we have already too many caught in the trap. Information from Step Change Debt Charity shows a dramatic rise in the number of people in my constituency seeking help with payday loans. 16% of the charity's clients in Inverclyde Council area had payday loans in 2012, and this figure jumped to 31% in the first 3 months of 2013. Between 2011 and 2012, the average amount owed by my constituents who were involved with these companies increased by £728 to £1,957. So it's it's in there, and I would say to Mike Mackenzie, who had mentioned some of the issues about getting into debt. This is a different type of debt. This is people who suffer financial exclusion. People happily live in this country with £60,000 of debt, £100,000 of debt. These people have not got a credit rating. They're excluded. That's why they have to go along to these companies. Getting that help and credit that we all take it granted for now, take for granted to get us through our lives. This is a different type of debt. This is at the end of the month, and the clue is in the name increasingly. Payday loans. And it's not a coincidence that this week the Joseph Rowntree Foundation told us that that was the biggest increase in any grouping of the number of people that are in poverty. And the wider issues that I want to address today, I think, need to be recognised. That while we can control and regulate this industry, we can't control and regulate the need for people to get access to credit. And what we can do with credit unions and others, things are very good. But the fundamental problem is that people, even in work, can't escape the poverty of benefits. Even those in work can't create job security for themselves. They can't even create security for one single shift with the inappropriate use of zero-hour contracts. Is it any wonder, in terms of the situation that these people face, that they are powerless to get from one Monday to a Friday, some of them walking home because they've not got the bus fare on a Thursday night that we have got this. No, I'm not taking an intervention because we've got so much time.
The member is concluding.
I'm running out of time. But seriously, this will be an issue irrespective of the Constitution. It's not good enough to say to the poor, wait till we get independence. It's not acceptable as it's creeped into this debate. It will be an issue irrespective of the Constitution. How do we address it? How do we use the powers of local government, of the Scottish Government, with a procurement pound, with a public pound? How do we engage with employers? That used to happen where you could go to the employer and get a loan for a week or an advance in a wage. How do we engage these people to deal with the problem we have here and now?
Thank you. Can I thank those members who did curtail their speeches, thus allowing me to call everyone? Minister, could I ask you to respond to the debate with a maximum of 7 minutes, please?
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm very pleased indeed that we have the opportunity to debate this important topic, especially at this time of year. And I thank Kezia Dugdale for giving us that opportunity. And I would praise the members, all of the members who have contributed in this debate and made very substantial contributions on a wide variety of different points. And I don't propose to rehearse all the statistics, some of which I was planning to do, but I do want to underscore the Scottish Government's view that the uncontrolled growth of payday lending in Scotland and the UK has been one of the causes of extreme social misery and hardship of our times. And it's a relatively new social malaise and disease. It didn't really exist around about a decade ago, and there's not many other social scourges about which you could say that. And therefore it is... No, well, I will in a minute, just if you bear with me. And therefore it's beholden to us all, I think, irrespective of party politics, to do our best with the powers that we have, but also urging those in Westminster who have other powers to address this beyond party politics. I think it's clear that we've argued consistently since Margaret Burgess first raised this in a members' debate, the first members' debate to which I responded in this Parliament, this session of Parliament, Presiding Officer, when she raised this same topic, that we felt that the lack of a cap on interest in the UK for payday loans was a very serious omission, which allows interest rates to be charged of the level of over 5,000%, which seems quite extraordinary. And we felt that that was wrong simply because so many countries in the world do have a cap on interest. So many states in America, I think 37, have controls on lending. In countries like Germany, France, Finland, Australia, there are caps on the amount of interest that can be charged. To have a cap on interest is the norm. In the UK, it is the exception. And therefore, as the Minister, I raised this issue on a number of occasions with the UK Minister Norman Lamb in April 12. At that point, the response was that there was a lack of evidence. Secondly, that a cap would lead to more consumer detriment. I respectfully disagreed with that and persisted and raised the issue again, seeking the UK Government to introduce a cap with Jo Swinson, the current Minister, and with the Chairman of the OFT in March this year. I met Jo Swinson again just a month or so ago to urge her to introduce a cap. And I'm very pleased that, as a result, I think, of all the pressure from parties and many others, that a cap is to be introduced. But I would say, and this is not a matter of politics, I would say that the decision not to introduce that cap until 2015, and I understand that's the UK Government's position, I hope I'm not misrepresenting it, is a wrong decision. I do think that a cap can be introduced in April next year, and I have therefore written yesterday to Jo Swinson, the UK Government Minister, urging her so to do, and to have an immediate consultation on this issue, because there needs to be a consultation about what level the cap should be, whether it should be in monthly interest, whether it should, as it happens in Australia, include a limit on the amount of charges as well. But this is not about party politics, Presiding Officer. This is about, I think, a matter that we can all see is necessary. There needs to be this particular control amongst many others, and the time to do it is as quickly as possible. We need to get it right, but with respect, I think we can get it right sooner than 2015. That's why the Scottish Government has said that that cap should be introduced in April next year, joining the many other countries in the world that regard this form of venal usury as socially unacceptable. It's ironic, Presiding Officer, perhaps, that just this morning I received on my mobile phone an unsolicited text message from a company who I should not name for fear of inadvertently advertising them or recommending them, which stated, "Need a loan for Christmas? Get cash in your account today with up to 3 months to pay back." I've had no dealings with this company whatsoever. I've never heard of them, and you can be rest assured that I will be writing to the FCA to complain about this particular company. But as we've heard from people such as Alison Johnson, the behaviour of some of these companies is absolutely unacceptable. There needs, in addition to the cap on interest, to be mandatory affordability checks. I think this was mentioned by Kes Dugdale. There needs to be a curb on advertising, and I see the NUS in Scotland have quite rightly called on that, and councils throughout the land do good work here. There needs, I think, to be further thought given to restrictions on continuous payment authority, the right to plunder your bank account, as Kes Dugdale rightly said. That, frankly, is absolutely wrong. In some cases, it's been done on hundreds of occasions, hundreds of attempts to go into your account, and every attempt leads to more bank charges. It's quite simply scandalous, and yet it's happening because it hasn't been properly regulated. Now, the Scottish Government has been doing many things seeking to use the powers that we have to best effect, and I think with cross-party support, to be fair to all the parties that are represented here in the Chamber, and the Liberal Party that's not here for this debate, through the Bankruptcy and Debt Advice Bill, we will make advice mandatory. We want there to be a financial NHS in this country, and we want to ensure that young people at school, and there's many school children here listening to this debate in the Chamber this afternoon. Why do we learn about physics, maths and history and we don't learn about how to manage money? Or we don't learn sufficiently well about that? That is something as a country we need to do. Much is done by the debt advice sector and banks and others, but we need to do more. We have, as Mike McKenzie alluded to, made changes to the debt arrangement scheme, which freezes interest and charges earlier, saving significant interest for those with payday loan debt. We've undertaken major marketing campaigns with the excellent partnership of the Daily Record, which has been leading the charge in this way, as so often it does, on social issues of the day. And in November, in Grampian, I launched the debt arrangement scheme. I launched the 12 Days of Debtmas campaign, and that has had an extraordinary response. Presiding Officer, my time is nearly up. This is a matter of massive... Well, I think I'm restricted to 7 minutes, otherwise I would. Mr McNeill.
It would be better if you were able to conclude.
Indeed. I apologise, but I was under time order, which I must, of course, comply with. I think Scottish Parliament has spoken very clearly today, Presiding Officers. We will next week with John Wilson's credit union debate. I thank members for participating in this debate, and I will continue to do everything in my power to address the extreme social misery that payday loans cause in Scotland today.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes Kezia Dugdale's debate on Financial Conduct Authority's plans to regulate the payday loan industry, and I now suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2 p.m.